So yeah, it's kind of inspiring. I've known Hennis for 12 years, and we went to Singularity University executive course together. Most 10-day educational programs are completely forgettable. They give a little blip in your sense of well-being, and then you forget everything that you learned. But this one was different. It's kind of life-changing, and so we've both been influenced by that, and we've kept in contact since 2010. And recently, we've been making earnest attempts to get Hennis here to Canada to meet us and speak to us. We tried very hard in 2019, and we're very close, but it didn't happen. And then we've tried in 2022, but we are convinced that eventually it will happen. So as good as today is, imagine what it would be if he was actually in the same room with you. Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to now turn, just before I turn it over to him, I know that you have great expectations for my virtual backgrounds. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a virtual background of take-home exam day. But I have no opinion about whether you should actually do the take-home exam with your socks and shoes off or not. But anyway, yeah. So Hennis, you can take it away.
All right. Thank you very much for the energetic intro, Kim. And yes, indeed, the executive program we went through at Singularity University in 2010, it was indeed a transformative experience for me. And, you know, in adult life, there's not that many of them. And it truly changed my outlook on life and my career choices, etc. And ever since that day, I've been working with applying exponential tech to the problems that I see in front of me. And for a brief background, before I start with the presentation I've prepared for you guys, very shortly about myself. So I live in Sweden, and I have a degree in business, but I've been a technologist for most of my life. I had a classic career in business, working for large corporates, but for the last 10 or so years, I've been a deep tech entrepreneur and a public speaker about the impact of exponential technologies. And I've started several different companies in different areas of technology. The main one I'll come back to a bit later today is a company called Disruptive Subdermals that aims to give mankind the organ that we were never born with, namely a digital organ for each and every one of us. But I've also been involved in a range of other young businesses here in the Nordic tech ecosystem. With that said, the reason why we're here today, and what I think may be relevant for you guys who are with a particular interest in the field of medicine, is the topic of augmenting ourselves with technology. And I've done a lot of talks and events and workshops on this topic. And I'm happy to have distilled some of my key insights for you. I've also, of course, done quite a few hacks and experiments in practice, because I think, you know, theory is theory, but the real insight comes from testing stuff out. It allows you to break through the hype and, you know, calibrate the expectation with the visionary things people say and what a potential technology can actually do for you. So with that said, let me open up my presentation here and share my screen. What I also want to say is that the setup that Kim and I planned for this session is that I'll do an intro lecture of roughly half an hour, and then we'll take a break and you know, just a leg stretcher. I know it's a pain to to sit in front of a screen. So it's our bodies, our physical meat bags that we live in. They need to move around and get stimulated in other ways than just by sitting and looking. So that's the plan. And then after the little break, I have a couple of questions for you, but most importantly, what I'm after here is that I want you guys who are participants to please, as I walk through my little presentation here, note down questions and reflections, and then we'll do a round of sharing, sort of something that caught your interest, something you didn't fully understand, something you want to elaborate on the things I present. Because what I will do is that I will be running through a lot of different concepts in a relatively short time. So I will be touching upon a lot of different topics and perspectives, and many of them may deserve a complete lecture of their own, and we can double click deeper and deeper on some of them if we want to, and that is based on your questions and interests for the second part of the session. Does that sound good with everyone?
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, pens or keypads ready. So anyway, the topic of my talk is how new technologies are impacting the human condition on an individual and on an aggregate level. And these are some of the questions I want to cover today, and that I want you guys to have as takeaways from this little session. So first and most importantly, what are human augmentation or human enhancement technologies? And I will use these terms, augmentation and enhancement, interchangeably. So if I say one or the other, it's just because it's nice to not use the same terms all the times. And then I'll give some of my thoughts and reflections. What are these things good for? Where do we stand in terms of how mature this is? Because some of these things are highly experimental, whereas others are already in mainstream use. And then obviously there will be some ethical considerations, how these should be applied in good ways, what are the perspectives we should keep in mind when we look at these technologies, because they are indeed very powerful, and they may bring some profound changes to what it means to be human, and how we see ourselves and the future of society and our kids. But the most important of all the ethical considerations I will give you already now, because it must be kept in mind, and that is that out of all these technologies, they must always be applied in a way which enhances our humanity in the best sense of that word. And if we ever feel or get the feeling that any of these technologies may be applied in a dehumanizing way, then that is the warning, that is the red flag that we should be very aware of. So the perspective is always to enhance our humanness and not to dehumanize in any way. All right, let's get into it. So what is actually human enhancement? My definition is this. We have long applied technology to human bodies for many different purposes, such as restoring lost functions. Someone has lost their hearing, someone has lost an arm or a leg in an accident, someone's heart is not doing the job it's supposed to be doing, so we put some technical device in or on the body of that person, which will give them restore a function. Well, human enhancement is not just about restoring, it's about going beyond the functional or the existing baseline of a person. There is also, of course, the whole field of plastic surgery and beauty or aesthetics related enhancements. And I won't focus on them because that I think is such a well-established industry all around the world. And whereas it may be driven by advances in materials, etc., ultimately it's, for me, if it's just about beauty and aesthetics, it's not enhancement in the true sense of the word. So human enhancement are technologies that's not just about restoring, but improving beyond human baseline functions and capabilities. Very broadly, if we take a tech perspective, human augmentation tech can be split across three broad areas. The first one is pharmacological type enhancements, pills and stimulants and hormone therapies of different kinds. The second one is cybernetic systems, that is anything that includes electronics, sensors, processors of different kind. And the third one is genetics. And my focus today will be mainly on the cybernetic space, but I'll also give you some highlights from these two others. But I want you to keep the broad perspective when you think about these technologies, that it's actually a wide field of things.
So we're not seeing the slides full screen, and we're seeing
really?
the whole slide set. So so you need to click
No.
so that.
Let's try again. Thanks for telling me. Does it look okay now?
Well, no, you need to click on the thing to make it full.
Yeah, I did. Dang it.
Yeah.
So thanks for interrupting.
Seeing that.
Let's try again. So what when I press presentation mode, it changes to presentation mode on my screen. So it doesn't do this for you?
No, we're still seeing the whole set of slides on the corner and the non-full screen in the center.
Oh, that is terrible. So I honestly don't know what to do other than pressing this presentation mode function. But what I guess I could do, I could reduce these things in some way. If you forgive me working with settings.
Yeah, I mean, that's
it's
better.
Not perfect, but it's better.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's try this. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, but it looks okay now.
Yes.
Relatively so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim. So I've used some Hollywood pop culture images here to illustrate these different human augmentation tech areas, because obviously Hollywood has already done a lot of work on spinning stories on top of the potential of these technologies. And I'm sure many of the viewers here are familiar with the movie Limitless, which is a story about New York stockbroker who wants to improve his brain functions and get these magic pills that makes him so smart. And in the biohacking sphere, we call these nootropics. So simply medicines or drugs that improve cognitive functions, which may be used for people with a certain diagnostic. It could be, for example, when you, sorry for losing the medical word, when you have a tendency to fall asleep outside of your control.
Narcolepsy.
Yes, narcolepsy, exactly. Thank you very much. Yeah. And narcolepsy can be a chronic state, or it can be something which is induced for different lifestyle reasons. And or it could be ADHD or other similarly related diagnosis. So, and there is a spectrum of these stimulants. I mean, there are some that are open to mainstream. You can buy them in a coffee shop, caffeine, nicotine, that have some demonstrated cognitive enhancement functions, all the way to those where you need a serious prescription and in order to get access to them, such as, for example, modafinil, which is the drug that inspired the movie Limitless, which is used specifically for narcolepsy. But between us, it also works great for managing jet lag. So had I been with you in Canada right now, maybe I would have shifted my circadian rhythm somewhat with the help of such a substance. So, but essentially, pharmacological human enhancement are temporary in its application because they affect the system for a short time. This is also a mature industry. It's good old pharma. There is clear regulation, at least here in Europe, and I'm sure it's the same in Canada, of how you can buy these things. They may not be available over the counter. Whereas we know, for example, in university circles that these are very popular for students who are preparing for exams and need to cut down a bit on the sleep. So there's also a different category on pharmacological human enhancement, things that are specifically applied for extending human longevity, such as rapamycin, metformin, and a few others that are also well known in the medical space that have interestingly been demonstrated to have some life extending capabilities. So, but you guys know this field already, so I'm not going to go that deep into the pharma part of this, but I wanted to cover it. The second thing I want to give you a few highlights on is, of course, genetics. So, genetics, here illustrated by the classic movie Gattaca. And as any nerd will notice, the letters C, G, A, and T make up the title of that movie. So, but genetic human enhancement is still an experimental field. We do it carefully. There are some very strong regulations and rules against doing this, especially to germline applications. There are some tremendously powerful applications. We have the capacity to treat terrible forms of cancer, even treat inheritable diseases through genetic therapies. So they hold great promise for helping advancing mankind. And the fascinating part with genetic therapies is that they may not necessarily be particularly expensive to make and to apply. And we've seen over the last 10 years very rapid advances both in how much cheaper and how much more accessible these technologies and solutions have become. So I have a feeling that these applications may be more widespread than we would learn from the media that we read. Some examples here of different therapies that are applied to humans today: stem cell therapies, mitochondria replacement, for example, actually giving a child technically three parents, because you get the nucleus from a mix of two parents and you can get your mitochondria from a third. And other examples, bone marrow donors, and you can modify, instead of having a donor give someone bone marrow, you can take bone marrow out from a person who is ill, genetically modify that individual's bone marrow and reintroduce them into that person and then restore certain functions. So when we speak about human gene therapies, we cannot get around the case of Jessie Gelsinger. Jessie was a young man who suffered from a rare genetic disease, a metabolic disease, who in most cases is lethal to newborns, but he had a very mild form of this disease. And he was able to manage it through specific medication and diet. And in the late 90s, there were some researchers who thought they had found a method to cure this disease. And Jessie volunteered to try it out. But sadly, the treatment went very wrong, and he lost his life in just a couple of days after receiving this genetic treatment due to multiple organ failure. And this terrible experience was, of course, a big setback for the advances in human gene therapy. And the field has not completely recovered ever since in some ways, and the rules and regulations around the applications of this were strengthened a lot. So this is a good patient case to keep in mind. With that said, over the last, say, 5 years, especially after the discovery of CRISPR, CRISPR-Cas9, Cas12, and the whole family of CRISPR applications that offer us cheap, robust, and relatively precise methods for editing genes, have meant that the field has again taken off, and there has been a lot of resources put in and new projects started and a lot of new research published around human gene therapies. And I want to give you an interesting indication. That is, I don't know if any of you recall, there was a huge climate conference in 2015 in the first week of December. That was the focus of the entire world. So all the world leaders were there, and all the global news media were reporting live. So CNN and BBC and thousands of other reporters were. The world got together and talked about the future of the planet, and now we must truly solve the climate challenge and get some new systems in place. And it was celebrated by, as a successful event by the United Nations and many of the participants who were there. But did you know that at exactly the same time, there was another conference that took place in Washington, D.C., that was covered by a single journalist, but one which, in my view, was more important for the future of mankind than the COP21 in Paris. And that is the world first international summit on gene editing. So interestingly enough, this event was brought together in somewhat of a hurry because of some recent publications that had been made earlier in 2015. And it was co-hosted both by the US National Academy of Sciences, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the UK Royal Society, and several other bodies. And they brought in the creme de la creme of genetic researchers from all over the world, who were all of them equally concerned that the cat was truly out of the bag in terms of what we could do with editing human genomes. And some decisions were taken at this international summit about how we need to regulate and how we need to get ethics in place in order to prevent this technology from going completely haywire. And some of the ideas were set down at that point, which will impact mankind for many, many years to come. But interestingly enough, there was a second similar summit, a follow-up summit 2 years later, the second international summit on human gene editing. And the attraction to do a dramatic statement at that point was too big for this young Chinese researcher, He Yankui. I'm sure you've seen his face and heard his name, who at this event, 3 years after the initial gene summit, presented that he had, in fact, genetically edited 2 embryos and then implanted them, and two young girls were born, and who seemed to be healthy, but there was also some ways in which these genetic editings on now living humans had not been perfect. So Yankui was ostracized from the scientific community. He was put in house arrest. He was fined. People distanced themselves powerfully from him. While in principle, what he did was not particularly complicated and was certainly doable by others as well. And I expect that he is more the tip of the iceberg than we may be aware.
So we're still seeing the limitless slide. I think you've gone beyond there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've gone significantly beyond. I've shown you so many more slides. That's so sad.
So
thank you. I mean, feel free to interrupt me. So okay,
yeah.
You see my pictures now?
No, we're still seeing the limitless
Okay.
image.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah, now we're seeing Jessie Gelsinger.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah?
so here we go. I'll give you a quick recap. I'm
Right.
sure you can keep in mind everything I've said.
Right.
It's odd that this is not working, and I apologize for it. From my end, it looks great. So I mentioned Gattaca and human empathetic enhancement. I gave you some examples of categories of human gene therapies, stem cell therapies, somatic therapies, hybrid therapies, mitochondrial replacement, etc. I told you the story of Jessie Gelsinger, this young man who was unfortunately died due to experimental gene therapy in the late 90s. Can you follow my slides now as they move?
We're still seeing Jessie. We are seeing Jessie, but yeah.
Now?
No.
Still Jessie?
Still Jessie.
Okay.
So
well, what
yeah,
about
now we're seeing COP21.
Yeah, this is the Paris, guys.
Yeah.
So this is the French Prime Minister and the Japanese this is the United Nations General Secretary and a bunch of other hotshots who are celebrating the climate summit results in Copenhagen, or sorry, in Paris in 2015. Okay, now I change slide again.
Not yet.
Nope.
Maybe it'll come.
Yeah.
Now
Here we go.
We're seeing human genome editing. Yeah.
Indeed, and this is the poster for the first summit, the blue one, and this is the poster for the second summit, which was held in November 2018. And this young researcher, He-Yang Kui, became world famous for being the first person who genetically modified humans, and then, as is not common in this research, that you destroy the embryos after a few weeks, but they were they went through the full development, and these young girls are now a few years old and are, as far as we are aware, living healthy lives. Okay, moving on. So here I have some stories about biohackers. I'll save them for later because I want to move on. And now I'm moving into the topic of cybernetic enhancement. And is that also available visually? Thank you for confirming.
It is.
Right. So cybernetic enhancement is when we apply electronics, processors, artificial intelligence systems, etc., in or on the human body. And here, this is an extremely dynamic field. Everything from, you can argue where to draw the line, but from smartphones to exoskeletons, these are cybernetic type devices, to use that term, with connectivity functions, Wi-Fi sensors, data processing capabilities, etc. And they are typically worn on or put inside the body. And that's why I would not consider a smartphone ultimately to be a human enhancement device, because it's, well, to some people it may be more or less permanently attached, but it's still not seen as such from a user point of view. And yes, this is a extremely rapidly evolving and expanding industry. Changing slide.
Yes.
Thanks for confirming. So, human augmentation technologies is about giving new abilities to healthy individuals, not just curing people who are ill or who may have lost some function, for purposes that are not aesthetic, medical, or restorative. And specifically within the field of cybernetic type enhancements, I will outline three main application areas. One of them being health and biometric monitoring, so capturing data from the body in different ways. Second category is augmenting senses and body functions such as strength or endurance. And the third category is cognitive or information access type augmentation. Let me get a bit deeper into these. Here I've made a little list which gives more of like an abstract overview of a range of these technologies, but is to illustrate some of these to you specifically. And you can see this list, I hope?
Yes.
Splendid. So here we see on the top headline axis, we see a categorization of these different devices, some of which are used temporarily, worn continuously, or even permanently attached to the body. Some of them collect data from the body, others give sensory input directly to the body. Some of them may even strengthen or augment body functions. And the categories we see here is starting from, having a fitness tracker on your arm, to having a device worn on your head that measures your electroencephalography, using noise canceling earbuds. Yes, they are, they adjust your sensory input for the body, and you can even use them, for example, for translation of languages live, for example. And I've just taken a category product or brand here in the right side that you can see, or maybe it's your left, of these if you want to check any of them out. Tdcs, Transcranial direct current stimulation, which is putting a weak electronic current to your brain, can also be done with ultrasound, which is demonstrated to improve focus and performance in certain settings. Well, augmented reality headsets, that was one of the illustrations you showed here to begin with, Kim. It's when we can add information layers in front of our eyes. There's also ingestible health sensors if you want to log data from inside the body without permanently attaching them. There's exoskeletons, I'll speak more about them. It's the health type implants. I'll give you some stories about the technology I'm personally working with. We can also see sophisticated design prosthetics that go beyond, just being an arm or a leg that you can do basic things with, but you can connect them with Bluetooth and you can store data in them and you can integrate all kinds of advanced functions. And then perhaps something which is well known, but because they get a fair bit of media, the Neuralink initiative, which is backed by Elon Musk. I mean, I cannot not bring it into this conversation, but my take on brain-computer interfaces is that this is still a very, very experimental technology. It may be of interest for someone who has, been to a terrible accident and lost most of their body functions, but for a healthy person to have an electronic implant in the brain, I think the risks far outweigh the potential benefits at the current stage, and I expect that to be the case for a couple of decades to come. So with that said, let me give you some more specific illustrations. I've been working with many of these technologies that I listed for you. I've tried most of them, all the way from exoskeletons to heads-up displays and all kinds of fitness wearables for many, many years. But one that caught my absolute attention, and I think has the potential to really make a difference on a mass scale, is health logging chip implants. So chip implants are typically, we put them in dogs and cats for decades. It's a well-known, well-researched, well-established, mass-produced technology. Tiny glass capsules made of a biocompatible glass that the body ignores, and that can include some electronics with certain functions. Basically, for animals, we use an ID tag that allows one to identify the animal and perhaps get some information about its owner or something. But something which is not particularly hard is to add sophisticated sensors and processors inside of these devices that are then, by way of an injector like this, placed under the skin. It takes a second, it hurts a bit, but then it's done, and you can keep one of these devices for many, many years because they don't have a battery. They are passive devices in that regard. And I'll be happy to show you. In fact, I'll do a demo. I'll stop sharing here, and so I'll go full camera, and I'll show you, because I have one of these implants myself. Now, I'm not going to strip naked in this setting, but because you never know where this video is going to end up, but you have to trust me when I say that right below my collarbone here, I have a tiny chip implant. It's about 14 millimeters long and a couple of millimeters in diameter. And when I swipe myself with my phone, even outside my shirt, so here I can open up an app, the app that we've developed, and then I do a reading like this. I just hold my phone to the implant like this. I don't know if you can see me if the light is. Can you see the phone? Or is it just white?
It is just white.
Okay. Let's see if I can do something. So this is what it looks like.
No, we're seeing temperature now.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to do a swipe. So I don't know if you heard the sound, but it's just checked, and it gave me a new reading at 37.0 degrees Celsius. You guys use Celsius in Canada, right?
Yes.
You're civilized.
Yeah, we're the kinder, gentler nation
of North America. Well aware. And yeah, so on purpose we have not made a Fahrenheit scale. I you know, out of all the things in science, I have little respect for the Fahrenheit scale of measurements because it just makes no sense. Anyway, so a demo, I think for you that by having a tiny sensor implanted wherever I am, it's not like a wristband or a Fitbit or something that I can lose, that I need to charge, but it's simply a sensor system that sits under my skin, and whenever I want to access it, I just swipe myself with my phone on the outside, and I can do a reading, and I can then share that data from the phone with, for example, a remote medical advisor. So in my eyes, it's a very neat technology, and it's well known, harmless, and it can create some real value for people. So let me get back into my deck before you guys get too tired. All right, can you see my slides again?
Yes.
All right, thanks. All right, so another company which is already in the mainstream, I mean in mass adoption, is Exobionics, that they do exoskeletons. So exoskeletons in this case is what you can call a wearable robotics. So it's a system of power enhancing or stability enhancing systems, as this gentleman here is wearing, that allow, for example, a worker to carry heavy loads or to hold a tool at height for an extended period of time without harming the muscles or getting tired. So it reduces workplace injury, workplace stress, and it improves productivity at the same time. And this is used in a lot of different manufacturing contexts already today. So it's a brilliant technology, and I can't wait for the day when we can all have this built into our blue jeans, allowing us to carry heavy stuff or run faster or whatever we fancy, because this technology is also getting cheaper and more accessible over time. So here's a few other examples. I think I mentioned them already. You can see my slide, I hope.
Yes.
This is a well-known astronaut wearing a heads-up augmented reality view that gives him a layer of information in front of his visual field. And yeah, here we have some wearables. We have an exploded view of an implant. We have another system that fascinates me, namely smart braces and smart teeth. If you want to put the device inside a person, if you do it the surgical way or as we do subdermally, there is always a danger when you break the skin and there's a chance to do harm or to get an infection. But I'm fascinated by the fact that most people have no problem visiting a dentist. And in fact, we all do in different times of our life. And what do dentists do? Well, they put artificial objects in our bodies that sit there for a very long time. The problem, though, is that these dentists, they put stupid stuff in our mouths when they could put smart stuff. Imagine what interesting data you can collect from, for example, a set of connected braces that would analyze your pH, your frequency of eating, your frequency of breathing, etc., in a way that would not change because you would anyway be wearing these things, but you would just have a way to collect that data automatically that could potentially spot interesting things in your system. So that's the paradigm that I foresee is emerging, that We are, through smart wearables and implantables and attaching sensors to ourselves, we enable new paradigms in healthcare. Remote monitoring, we enable personalization of medicine because we can do individual effect analysis of medication and treatments and lifestyle changes. And I think that it's weird that we can build such smart systems for business and logistics and web traffics, and we can have these live dashboards where everything is happening. But for the most important system of all, you know, the one that keeps us alive, we don't have access to real-time data in the same way. And that is something I want to work to change. Okay, so we're coming a little bit to the finish line here in terms of the first section. So to summarize, what are human enhancement technologies good for? So yeah, they can of course be applied for purely for personal development, for improving health or performance. In workplace settings, we can use them to reduce injury and improve productivity. And there are, of course, if more broadly applied, there are some excellent public health applications for these technologies. So I'm sure you can come up with more examples yourselves from these things that I've highlighted. And what I want to do is I want to discuss these things with you, but I think maybe it's time for a 5-minute break and leg stretcher to energize all of us and collect our thoughts. What are your opinions?
Sure, that sounds good.
Okay.
Maybe you can unshare, and that way we can keep track of when people come back from the break. And
take a bio break, grab a
going.
coffee.
Right.
Thank you for being active in the chat. I appreciate that, Mispa. So yeah, I'll mute for a few minutes and refill my cup of tea, and I'll see you at in 5 minutes from now.
Right, sounds good. So we have some interesting phenomena in this class. So we have 2 students today from the same family, so you'll notice the same last name. Yeah. Okay, welcome back.
Yeah, I changed my shirt, so just so you know, it's not fake. Maybe there's a way to do that. Anyway, I hope you guys did take the chance to stand up, move your bodies a little bit. I mean, sitting is profoundly unhealthy, so make sure you get your circulation and get some rehydration or something. So the meat bag gets it, and then we can get back to focus on feeding the brain. Right. So what I would like to do now, or are we still waiting for a couple of persons maybe?
I think we can proceed, and then
let's
other
proceed.
people
And they're
can
pretty
join.
good.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
My idea and hope was that you guys wanted to share a comment or a reflection or question, and we can discuss this. And then I have a few more slides that I want to cover, but I wanted to touch base with everyone here. So if there's someone who wants to share by video or in the chat.
So, one thing I was thinking about is that the next thing we will do in the course is a special version of the course on a trial basis for Nepal. And we have a young doctor who's been working with me, Pooja, who's with us today. And maybe she could give a kind of Nepalese perspective on how this would fit in resource limited countries. Does this seem like something practical only in the US and Canada and Sweden, or could it be something worldwide?
Yes, please.
Do you have any thoughts about that, Pooja?
Yeah, so I belong to a country where getting a proper medical treatment is very crucial and very difficult in many parts of the country. So having such fancy equipments in your body is we cannot even imagine such things happening in Nepal right now. But there are a few things as we said, Fitbits and smartphones and all such things. There are people using such things, not the people in the rural area, but people in the capital. There are a lot of people using such things. But in Nepal, having some devices in your body is not possible, at least not now. So yeah, but
thank you, Pooja, for sharing. I should just say that typically these devices that we use, they cost maybe $25. So, and you can use them for decades.
Okay.
So that is, for me, the interesting part with this technology is that it's truly accessible and democratically in that sense that someone who may have a whole day to travel to a hospital can still, by way of a personal sensor, and someone nearby, it need not even be that person, has a smartphone, and then you can do remote diagnostics. So
yeah, this is really good, because I know of a place, it's called Acham. It's a very rural part of Nepal, and there are people they are putting new things. They are using artificial intelligence and doing ultrasound and all. They're doing such things in very rural part of Nepal, but maybe because people are not educated and all, they smartphones, they use it only for fashion, because it looks that you're carrying carrying an expensive phone and all. I don't think there are a group of people that make actual use of such things in Nepal. That is one of the problems there.
Yeah.
No, I see that problem as well, and maybe it could be of interest to equip, for example, a nurse with such a phone, and that would allow someone to diagnose a larger group of people. But that's to be explored. But thank you for that very interesting feedback on where we stand.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to share some thought or reflection?
I had, I guess, like a question / comment. So about the implant that you were talking about that you have, do you know if that's available in like other countries in Sweden, or is that just something that you had found was like available just in your country?
No, these are available in different countries, at least in the European Union. And
Okay.
I don't know, where are you based, Ms. Ba? You're in
Yeah,
Canada?
also in Canada, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think the regulations that we have are very, very similar. So I don't see why they could not be made available in Canada at relatively short notice. So I'll share a couple of links in the chat if you guys want to check it out. We're, for example, doing an open beta program for people who want to just see how this technology works and try an implant for a few months or something.
Oh, okay, that's cool. So it's like widely kind of distributed to like the general public too. So you don't have to have any like specific condition or anything to have something like that. Yeah.
No, in that way, you can compare it more to like a Fitbit device than a medical device. So the medical claims will have to come a bit later.
Okay, makes sense. That's cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Well, I'm not going to be pushing for questions, but if you have some, put them in the chat or open up at any time. And if not, I have a few more images that I can share, and maybe one of them will also raise some thoughts and ideas for you. So if that's fine, I'll
Yeah.
back to share a few more.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. So let's try like this now. Just a second. Can you see the screen better now?
Yeah, we're seeing the
That's the beginning, yeah.
Screen at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. So I need to I need to just skip through the deck. It would be a very quick repeat.
Sure.
So
we
let's see
we
here.
don't mind reviewing history.
Exactly, and I think I got some nicer graphics now. So because I integrated myself here with the slides. Anyway, okay, we saw pharma, genetics, Jessie Gelsinger, Copenhagen, no COP21, augmentation tech, chip implants. Here we go. So let's discuss. We had a few reflections. So, guys, we cannot do this without asking the why, right? Because it's kind of cool to do these things. It could be interesting from a science point of view, but ultimately, what are the, if we are going to apply technology to humans, to ourselves, we need to have some solid answers to the why. So I want to share now with you some of the thoughts I've picked up over the last years from my many meetings and conversations here. Feel free to interrupt me with your thoughts and reflections throughout. So, but basically, if we take a long perspective of human history, a theme or a trend has been that we've gone from a world with very limited freedom and limited access to many, many things to ultimately giving ourselves increasing degrees of freedom in terms of access to education, in terms of human rights, in terms of access to health services, financial services, ability to travel, to influence the world around us. And I see human enhancement technologies as part of that spectrum. They will ultimately give us even greater freedom in terms of the information we can access, in terms of the healthier lives that we can live, because there will be this system that keeps an eye on my health. Just like modern cars have, they have a software that, there's a warning light when something is going wrong at the very early stage. So that is sort of the perspective I have on this. And the second perspective is that the human condition, the way that many people on this planet live today, unfortunately, are not as good as we want it to be. We are still plagued by ill health, short lifespans, limited opportunities, etc. And for me, being a technologist and an entrepreneur is very much about not accepting the status quo. It's about saying, yes, we can make something better in this world, and we can improve the lives of billions of people if we really want to, because we can see the solutions for doing so. And a bit more specifically, if we look at human biology and our bodies and our psyches and our behaviors and our instincts, we know that they are shaped and built in a world, you know, the last 200,000-300,000 years, when our species Homo sapiens evolved and became what we are today. We lived in a very, very different world than the one we inhabit today. We lived in small tribes, hunter-gatherers. We ate very different things. We met much fewer people. We had to protect ourselves from different kinds of threats. Starvation was always a problem, access to resources. And if you met a human that you hadn't met before, the best strategy was probably to treat them as an enemy, right? And hit them with the stone axe before they hit you. And now the world we live in today is so different in terms of we live in an age of information where you can find all this information about different people, that you need not fear someone just because you haven't met them before. We live in a world where you know, we're totally used to interacting with strangers. You click on an app, there's a random gentleman that comes up with a car, and you get into that car and you just trust that person to take you somewhere else. It's fantastic. At the same time, yes, we live in an age of food abundance. So all throughout human history, starvation, surviving the winter was the real problem. But now, today, there are more people on this planet who suffer from having too many calories in their daily diet than there are people suffering from having too few. So the problem has shifted. And this, in my view, means that we humans are in some ways unfit for the world we are inhabiting now, and especially the one we're going to inhabit tomorrow, which will be even more extreme than the one we inhabit today, compared to the one which shaped us. To give you a few fun examples, if you take a critical view, so to say, of the human body, there are very interesting things to see, that you know, weaknesses in how we're made. For example, the fact we're the only mammal that walk on two legs all the time. So the skeleton we have is designed for walking on four legs. That's why everything from horses to cats to you know, and everything in between walk on four legs, because it's doesn't put so much pressure on the spine. But we humans at some point decided to walk upright, and in this setting, that's why we all have back problems sooner or later, because we're not designed for walking in this way. And it was a trade-off we had to do when we wanted to start using our two hands for different things. So if you know, the other animals in the animal kingdom that walk on two legs, such as large birds, or if you look at certain dinosaurs, they all compensate this bipedalism with having a huge tail, you know, to put the limited pressure on the spine and not putting it completely vertical like we do. Another fun example, I think, is the teeth in our mouths, right? So if you look at these classic skeletons of chimpanzees and gorillas, and then the human skull, you can see that a feature of us is that our jaw bones are much tighter. And this is the reason why 9 out of 10 people have uneven teeth. It's because you know, there's not enough room for the teeth, because our jaws have shrunk in as part of our evolution. You know, just a couple of fun illustrations, and there are many others. The design of the inner eye, or the vagus nerve, and other fun things that you can look at. But basically, the point I want to make is that there's a bunch of design improvements we can do to the human body, which are very evident. And perhaps most importantly, if we go beyond the individual health dimensions, okay, yes, these are the attributes of our bodies. More importantly is our cognitive and moral capacities, right? Because the biggest difference from our ancestors is not that, you know, we have more calories accessible or we have more information accessible at touch of our fingertips, is that we now also have the technology to completely ruin the planet and kill everyone on board. And we are still ruled on this planet by people who have very, very primitive instincts. I don't need to name any names because I think everyone who has been following the news can fill in the blanks themselves, but people who still look at neighboring people as someone who should be conquered and killed and driven from their land, and you know, who don't see any consequences in throwing bombs at other people. And for me, as long as we are ruled by mentalities of xenophobia and racism and fear of others and tribalism and these things, you know, we can never be safe, and we can never live in an harmonious world. And that's why I also think we must try to apply these technologies to improve ourselves ethically, morally, cognitively, and not just improve our, you know, basic health functions. You know, I could pile up examples of this, and they may not be news to you at all because you're an educated group of persons. But for example, you know, the environmental destruction that we see. I mean, the short-sightedness of our thinking, of our economic systems, etc., is what's killing us, and what is making us ruin this one planet that we have. Another point I want to make is applying technology to the human body is something we've always done. If among the oldest bodies that we found that are, you know, 4, 5, 6,000 years old in the Andes, or in the Egyptian mummies, or in frozen Siberian burial mounds that have been part of the permafrost, there is a pattern, interesting enough, that all of these human cultures have used tattoos and body modification as ways of making themselves prettier or giving themselves powers or magic of different kinds. And the point I want to make is that applying technology to ourselves, I mean, technology is what separates humans from the animals, right? They may use tools from time to time. A monkey can use a stick, but they don't use technology. They don't improve the stick. They don't reuse the stick and make it stronger, better in different ways. But that's what we do. And it's essentially human to apply these technologies also to improving ourselves, to making our bodies stronger, better, giving them magic powers and whatnot, right? I see it as an act of humanity. And of course, it's times we live in that we're all, whether we like it or not, the world our kids grow up in, we are all addicted, and we are all integrated in our, you know, in our thought processes, in our communications, in our dating lives, in our how we manage our finances and other resources. We all do this through technology already today to a significant extent. I don't know about any you guys, but I dream about apps. I dream of Excel and PowerPoint, and you know, it's both frightening and, you know, and an interesting observation that how these visual systems are, you know, part of our cognitive patterns in a completely integrated way. So coming to the finish line a little bit here, I want to give you 4 specific directions within human enhancement. So the first one being applying technology for curing disease and aging, for giving people not just longer lives, but, as we like to say, not lifespans, but health spans. So allowing people to have health and being able to live active lives much, much longer than today. The second dimension is expanding perceptual abilities, improving our senses, giving us better eyesight, better hearing, completely new senses. A project I've been involved in for some years as an investor is to create a wearable device that allows you to feel the magnetic fields of the Earth, so that you can always know where is north and you can navigate by instinct. I mean, birds have these patterns, migratory birds. They can feel the magnetic fields of the planet. So why shouldn't we? And this is something that technology can give us. The third one is, of course, improving physical and cognitive abilities, giving us the ability to remember more things. I mean, these smartphones, they already serve in some ways as an exocortex, right? They keep our memories, they keep the images, they keep the contacts, they keep the information of the things we want to do, which we would in the old days have kept inside in this not that totally reliable memory system. So here we have great potential to also add new qualities to mankind. And then maybe I'm blocking the text, but the fourth and perhaps most interesting application of human enhancement is to improve moral and ethics of ourselves. And that is something that is urgently needed, perhaps more urgently than any of the other dimensions of human enhancement. I'm not going to read this, but I want to show you that there are some great thinkers who have been putting a lot of thought into this. What does it mean when we start augmenting ourselves with technology? There is, if you want to check it out online, there is this Cyborg Bill of Rights that outlines some very important principles, such as, for example, let's say everyone is wearing a smartphone equivalent implanted in themselves. Who would actually own that device? Would it be Apple that would own it, or do I own it because it sits in my body? And I'm firmly in the latter camp here. I also think that you cannot remove someone, a device from inside of someone without their explicit consent. You cannot update the firmware of a device that sits inside the body of someone without their full explicit consent, etc. So we need to work out these principles and how they work in practice as we're building this industry. In terms of philosophical perspectives, I want to bring up this. This is one of my most important hobby horses, and that is what the perspective that is most prevalent in both societal decision making and not least in medical and technology research is the precautionary system. Namely, let's be careful. If we're working with a complex system, we don't know exactly what the new thing we're trying to reduce is going to do. The number one principle must be to minimize harm. I mean, it's a strong principle, right? It's the precautionary principle. If we don't know, if we don't understand, it's better to say stop or no. But I want to make a special pledge for human enhancement technologies, because human enhancement technologies have such tremendous potential upside of what they can do for us. If they can significantly expand human lifespan or enhance our sensory universe or dramatically improve our cognitive abilities, then not doing these things is actually more risky, you can argue, than pursuing them. And that is what the philosopher Max More has coined as the proactionary principle. If the potential benefits are high enough, certain risks are worth taking and must be taken, because not pursuing them is actually a worse moral outcome than doing so. And I want to compare this with police officers or first responders who actually run towards the danger, who run to face the terrorists or run into a burning building, because they know what they do, they understand the risks, but they're willing to take them because of a bigger good for mankind. And I think that we need more of the proactionary thinking and the proactionary mindset and the proactionary principle when we look at human enhancement technologies. So, in a sentence, human enhancement is high risk, yes, to some extent, but more importantly, a very high reward investment if we pursue it. And to summarize, I think that our story, as I start out this short session, has been one of liberation, right? We've liberated ourselves step by step from slavery and serfdom, women's rights, minority rights, the rights of people, the economic rights, access to being part of democratic decision making in different societies, etc. The historical trajectory is one of increasingly giving ourselves more freedom and power and agency. But there are still, in the age that we happen to be born in, two big prisons that limit our potential as individuals and as a species. And those two prisons are, number one, the gravity well of the planet we were born on, that makes it so hard and expensive for us to go beyond and to explore other heavenly bodies. And that simply must be, we must break out of that prison. And the second one is, of course, the prison of these meat bags that we're born in, that, in their fragility and with all the flaws and of course, beautiful things that these bodies give us in terms of sensory experiences and the eating a nice meal or sitting in the sunshine or taking a swim in the ocean and all these lovely things, that the experiences that our bodies allow us to do. But they also limit us in very, very profound way in their fragility and in their susceptibility to disease and their rapid aging. Yes, just as we're getting somewhat wise in life, then life is cut short for most of us. And I think that's an incredibly sad state of affairs. So we must also work to liberate ourselves from the prison of the meat bodies. The good news is that indeed we live in a time, we were privileged to be born in a time where we are truly breaking out. We see that different race to the stars is happening in our generation, and thanks to human augmentation technologies, we are breaking out of the stone. We like this classic statue, which is called Slave Breaking Out of Stone, and it is. We're learning that we can push the limits of these bodies made of meat in completely new ways, and we can experience completely new things. So I think in the present century that we are heading towards a completely different level of human diversity than the one we have seen so far, in a much bigger richness of human experiences and human choices and ability to define who we are as individuals and as groups and collectively. So we are heading towards a much richer human experience thanks to technology. And that makes me profoundly optimistic about the future, about all the beautiful things we are going to experience, all the insights that are still ahead of us that we will discover in the years to come. And the richness of the tapestry of mankind, which is the most awesome thing that exists in the universe, right? There is, thanks to humankind, the universe is conscious of itself, right? Stones, stars, satellites, asteroids, they're not conscious of their own existence, but we are, and thereby the universe is as well. So with that said, I think that we should not fear human enhancement. Quite the opposite. We should accept the fact that we are still just a seed. We're an acorn right now, who is just beginning to grow into a tree. And we're only at the very start of our potential as a species, as a civilization. So that was sort of my short message for today. If there's anyone who has thoughts or reflections or wants to comment on what's been said, I'm very happy to take the last 10 minutes here to engage with you.
No, I think that this second part was one of the best presentations we've ever had here in 10.5 years. So the obvious solution in the video production is that I'm going to make the second half part 1, and then the first half is part 2, the backstory, because people think the backstory, and then it starts with us talking about being at, the SU executive program. And yeah, that's really good too. But so if you would allow me to mess with reality just a little tiny bit, make the second part 1, and then the first part 2, the backstory, then I think we'll have the perfect video production here.
No problem, Kim. I think also the graphics work better in the second part.
Sure.
So we learn as we go along, and I trust you fundamentally to take my my input and process it in a way that makes it most useful for the audience that you know very well.
Yeah. But
I should also mention before I leave that if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or by way of this email. I'm quite easy to find online.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great presentation, and there are lots of insights. It's very appropriate for this course, and the medical students taking the course, I think will find this very inspiring too. And yeah, so it's really been ideal. The only thing that would have been better is if you were really here in Canada, and we'll make that happen, sometime
before you know
soon.
it.
Yeah. So I discovered something which you can see on my Instagram channel, which is just my name, Kim Soles. But I have pets at home, and they include African dwarf frogs. And if you think of what their life is like, what I used to think their life is like, and I was missing a big insight here, is that they're at the bottom of the tank, and they have to go up to get air every now and then. And we have a big tank, so it's a long way up. And then I realized, so now we have, for kind of accidental reasons, a very turbulent tank with, bubble production and like waves.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized the frog's body is made that in that circumstance, it basically is like weightless. It naturally goes to the top. It can stay there forever. The food also rises to the top. And now I've discovered this life of Riley, this absolute frog utopia, just by making the water more turbulent, that the frog can just stay on the top of the water and party all day.
I must ask you, Kim, as a doctor, I think we humans and frogs have that in common, that we share the same natural habitat, right? We want to be in the shore. We want to be in the breaking water.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
When we're free, where do we want to go, right? Most people go to the beach. That's like our instinct draws us to that place, right? Where we have access to the shallow water and we can go in and out of water.
Right. But it's so uncanny. Like when I watch the frogs in this turbulent water, they don't have to exert any energy at all to get to the top. Just the waves themselves sort of propel them upwards. It's like the coolest thing. And so I think a lot of what you're describing is kind of like that. It's a discovery of how we can enhance the natural things that are already there and make our life much better. Yeah. And so yeah, I'm very excited about that. And also the philosophy in the second half of your presentation was very, very inspiring and similar to my own view of the world.
I think that is I'm aware that is the case, and there's a lot more to be seen there. I want to share one reading piece for people if you want to capture a very beautiful piece by, again, this philosopher Max More. He's called A Letter to Mother Nature.
Mm-hmm.
So beautiful. It's just a page. and it's written in the form of, mankind writing a letter to Mother Nature and saying, hey, Mother Nature, by the way, say hello to Dad. We haven't seen him around. And saying that, Mother Nature, thank you for making us what we are, but now we have grown up and we can actually begin to take responsibility for ourselves and our evolution. And it's a lovely little read. So enjoy it.
I should tell you that Max Moore and I spent a lot of significant time together at a meeting in 2010. And it's when I tell you this, you'll say there can't be such a thing, but there is. It's the Mormon Transhumanist Society, and they had a meeting, and we spent a lot of quality time and very memorable time there.
No, the Mormon transhumanists are great.
Yeah,
I think they managed to combine making, human enhancement again. It makes total sense with many of the Christian values. So
yeah.
It requires some strength to go beyond the basic sort of scriptural concepts, but it's a very interesting movement.
Yeah, it is, and it's so surprising. It's like people say, "You must have made that up." But no, it's quite real. So Max and I spent some very pleasant times together at that meeting. Okay, well, I won't keep you very long any longer.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Kim, for hosting. It's been a pleasure to connect.
Yeah, this has been.
You know where to find me if there's anything else, and anyone watching this video later, much pleasure.
Right. And there will be a face-to-face encounter on video in later this year or next year or sometime soon. Yeah. Hennis and I will make that happen. Okay, everybody. Thank you
very much.
Bye-bye now.
Good night and good day.
Okay.